Midweek Murders contains graphic and explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello!
I'm not ready.
Absolutely spiffing to hear your voice.
Don't make it weird in the first 5 seconds.
Maybe we should start?
Maybe we should give the listeners a warning that this case is not a murder mystery case like all the others.
Well, it's gonna be clear, probably, from the...
I think everybody knows who Typhoid Mary is.
I
But...
think so, too. But we could say something about it.
Okay, listeners, all of you interested in potential murder tips, skip this week.
Skip every week, because I always cut it out, so...
Oh, god damn it.
Oh, god damn it! Okay.
Then what am I here for?
The jury is still out on that one.
I'm
I'm just kidding. You have a lot to say about the cases.
Not always.
Not always, but...
Got anything to contribute, Joe? No, think you covered it, actually. Should we wrap this up?
You think that's the case, but you talk for like 60-80% of the episodes.
Well, then how much do you cut out? Jesus Christ.
I cut out a lot of you talking.
And I'm still 60%. Fuck me.
Okay, it's Wednesday, which means that it's time to talk about crime. I'm your host, Sandra.
And I'm your co-host, Joe.
This week we're going to talk about Typhoid Mary, or Mary Mallon, as she is actually named. And I got my information from Wikipedia, Mary Mallon and the history of typhoid fever from the website where you usually send me links. It's ncbinh.gov PMC. Is that like the medical articles? What is that called?
NCBI is the National Centre for Biotechnology Information.
Okay.
And it forms part of the United States National Library of Medicine, a branch of the National Institutes of Health.
Oh, really?
Mm.
That is where I got my information, some of it. An article on history.com by Christopher Klein. Eine kleine Christopher, ja. An article in the Smithsonian Magazine by Veronique Greenwood. And Encyclopedia Britannica, which I still can't get over that they spell it with an A in the pedia.
Yeah, I think that's probably because a lot of places don't accept the AE symbol. But also, I pronounce it encyclopedia, but always read it encyclopedia.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, encyclopedia?
I don't know how the AE is actually meant to be pronounced because it's not included in any English words. So I'm just like, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah, me too.
I got my sources from the WikiWikiWa and also the National Centre for Biotechnology Information, which is part of the United States National Library of Medicine, a branch of the National Institutes of Health in the USA.
Oh my god, maybe we read the same article.
No. Maybe.
Nope.
Well, 2 of mine were from the NCBI, so it's possible that one of them was the same. Probably the history of Typhoid Mary might be the same one, but, you know.
Mary Mallon was an Irish lady born with typhoid in 1869 as her mother had been infected during her pregnancy. Side note, this is a theory. When Mary was only 15 years old, or thereabouts, she moved to America, where she lived with her aunt and uncle for a while, whilst working as a maid. In her 30s, she began working as a cook for a wealthy man in New York called Charles Henry Warren. Within a week, 6 of the 11 people living in the Warren household had fallen ill with typhoid fever. And here, surprisingly early in the episode, I'm going to ask you about typhoid fever. What is it?
Oh, good Lord. I wasn't ready to be involved this early.
She's already at the door.
Let me put my penis away and get my notes.
Like a proper lady.
Oh, let me just straighten out my dress and I'll be right with you.
Mhm.
Help yourself to the iced tea on the counter.
I will. I hope it's spiked with brandy.
There's extra sugar in the decanter.
Ooh.
So, typhoid fever is a bacterial infection, usually spread by, this is pretty gross, eating or drinking contaminated food or drink. And that food or drink is contaminated with human feces.
Ew.
For all of those that are not averse in Latin, human feces means shit. People shit. You get typhoid from eating or drinking food or drink with human shit in it.
Oh, God.
So it's most common in what was formerly known as third world countries. I think they're now known as developing.
I thought typhoid fever was like eradicated.
No.
No.
It's not very common in the developed world
Oh.
through a combination of factors, mainly antibiotic treatment when it was first established and health and hygiene practices. So the easiest way to eradicate it is regular hand washing.
So the privilege of running water.
Not even running water, but just the privilege of soap.
Oh, okay.
You could still theoretically get typhoid from your tap if your water source was contaminated. If your reservoir was contaminated, then your drinking water would be contaminated.
Yeah.
So it's still possible to get it in developed countries, but with the combination of antibiotics and increased public awareness of hygiene, it's a lot less common. But in 2015, there were 12.5 million recorded cases of typhoid fever and 149,000 deaths.
So my awareness of this was nil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't comment on that. Only you know your awareness of this.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
But the USA records thousands of cases a year. But then you only have to look at places like the place that hasn't got fresh water, whose name has just completely evacuated my brain now.
Flint.
Yes, Flint. So Flint would be the perfect example of cases in the US of typhoid because they haven't got clean drinking water.
Yeah.
So it would be easy for their water source to be contaminated. It's a pretty nasty disease, so usually symptoms will occur after 6 or 7 days of infection. In the first week, you'll suffer from fever, malaise, headache, cough. In the second week, your fever will spike to about 40 degrees Celsius. The normal body temperature is 37, I think.
Or thereabouts.
And it's important to know that even a 1 degree shift in body temperature is enough to start denaturing your proteins. So 3 degrees with this fever can be lethal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a 40-degree fever can be lethal.
I've had 40 degrees fever before.
And that's why you're dead now. Anywho. Typhoid. So the second week of symptoms, you'll experience bradycardia, which is a decreased heart rate, delirium, and a tender stomach in the lower quadrant. Ooh.
So the part where you feel your menstrual...
I wouldn't know. I don't have a womb.
Okay.
You say okay like this is news to you.
Well, I can't be sure, but...
Where's the fetus gonna gestate? In a box?
Gonna put it in a shed outside, huh?
And then the third week, the symptoms start to get real bad. You can experience intestinal hemorrhage, intestinal perforation, which can lead to sepsis because you've got a bunch of shit floating around in your intestines. Encephalitis, which is inflammation of your brain, closely linked to meningitis, pneumonia, and bronchitis.
Oh.
So pretty fucking brutal.
So is that what you had on typhoid fever?
I've got a bit more.
I'm ready.
The nomenclature is quite interesting. So the bacteria that causes typhoid fever is called Salmonella subspecies Enterica serova typhi, which basically means that it's Salmonella typhi. But it's the same species of bacteria that causes some strains of food poisoning, Salmonella. So when you get Salmonella food poisoning, you've got lucky because you haven't got the typhoid version.
Oh.
Yeah, the food poisoning type of Salmonella can be zoonotic, so it can be passed from animal to human, and again is transferred by fecal matter. So anybody that's got Salmonella food poisoning, gross, you've eaten shit.
Isn't COVID also a...
Zoonotic, yes, because it originated in bats. The interesting thing about S. typhi, the bacteria responsible for typhoid, is that there are no animal carriers. So this particular bacteria, the reservoir host, is humans.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't affect animals. So an animal can be infected with S. typhi, typhoid fever, but they won't pass it on and they won't exhibit any symptoms of it. The transmission and the reservoir host is humans.
Oh.
As we talked about earlier, the best way to control S. typhi is sanitation, basically. And the Center of Disease and Infection Control in the US, the CDC, has said that something as simple as chlorinating water, which every first world country does, they found that as soon as they started chlorinating water, the amounts of reported typhoid fevers dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. The biggest cause of typhoid fever transmission is contaminated food or drink. If you can decontaminate that with chlorine, then your transmission rates drop. That's all I have because the rest is about gallbladder stuff, so we can get onto that later.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay, so the Warren family hired a sanitary engineer, which, side note, I didn't know was a profession, but I'm glad it is, to investigate this outbreak. A man named George Sober.
See, I read sources that said he was Soper.
Oh.
With a P.
Oh, shit. I probably
I mean,
read
I
both.
did read a source that said he was sober, but I read two others that said he was Soper.
Okay, I'm gonna call him George for the rest of the episode, so we'll just call him George, but it might be Sober or Soper. I think I read both, and I think my brain just filtered out the other ones because the first one I read had Sober.
And you were like, this reflects my personality.
Jokes all around.
Therefore, he will be sober.
So George published his results the following year, and although he initially believed freshwater clams to have been the source of the spread, he soon realized that some of the infected had not eaten the clams. He concluded that Mary had exhibited a mild form of typhoid and theorized that Mary was a healthy carrier, in quotes, of the disease, being the first author to describe this phenomenon.
This might take a while.
Phenomenon, yes. This is funny because I saw Taskmaster with, and I was like, haha,
yes, I remember.
she can't say phenomenon. And then I was like, phenomenon. Fucking shit.
Are you
Karma,
pulling
man.
the same faces as she did? Like you're trying to squeeze out a poo.
Karma strikes again.
Phenomenon. Da, 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 da. Phenomenon. Da, 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 da.
Phenomenon. Yes.
No.
Phenomenon.
Yes.
Yes. This sparked a somewhat unhealthy obsession in George. Unhealthy. See what I did there? And he started stalking Mary, tracking her movements and the spread of disease. So George had been following the super spreader around for a while and had linked 22 outbreaks of typhoid in New York and Long Island to Mary, although Mary herself have proved elusive, as she had swiftly moved on to another place of employment following every outbreak. So what I think happened was that the household where she worked had fallen ill and she just moved on to another household.
It seems to be that she worked at numerous households, but as soon as the investigating forces got to the household that was infected, she'd already moved on.
Which in most cases seemed to have been George himself. But also he was the leading expert in typhoid outbreaks, as I understand it now.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
a specialist.
In 1907, George approached Mary when she was working as a cook in a house on Park Avenue, demanding samples of her blood, feces, and urine. George stated of this encounter that Mary had promptly seized a carving fork and advanced in his direction.
I don't know, well, that's amusing.
I find it endlessly humorous because I can just imagine, like, this was in the beginning of the 19th century. Wait a minute, is it the 19th century?
20th century, darling.
That's so weird for me. It's still weird.
Why is it weird?
You call it the wrong century.
Okay, so you're in the first year AD.
Mm-hmm. Wait a minute.
So,
I'm gonna...
No, listen. You're in 1 AD. This is the first century.
In Sweden, we just call it 1 AD. You can't call it another 100
you can.
years.
You can. Shut up. Year 1888, or whatever the fuck year Typhoid Mary decided to spunk all over the chicken, is the 19th century after Christ. It is not a difficult concept.
So 1907 was the 20th century.
20th century.
No.
Yes, it is. It's easy. Year 2021. We are in the 21st century after Christ. Christ didn't even exist. This whole system is arbitrary.
It hasn't even happened yet. It's a fallacy.
I don't know why you're stickling over this. We should have stuck to the Gregorian calendar.
So George then enlisted the help of the New York Department of Health, as well as Dr. Josephine Baker, who was a famous doctor at the time. And they went to acquire the samples from Mary alongside police. Mary, though, evaded them for 5 hours and was finally caught because part of her dress had stuck in the door of her hiding place.
Nightmare. Happens to me all the time.
Yeah, that many layers.
That is so 20th century.
Must have been a pain. After the stool sample tested positive for typhoid, the authorities had her forcibly quarantined on North Brother Island, an island in the East River that housed a hospital that specialized in treating spreadable diseases such as smallpox and tuberculosis. Smallpox and tuberculosis seem such last century, but you know.
Well, it literally was. So gonna need 5 minutes. Smallpox was so last century. Yes. Yes, quite literally it was. Okay, I'm back. You're doing great.
But also, it will be a household name again, seeing as anti-vax is on the rise.
Well, yeah, in America anyway.
The island. Oh my god, have you seen the island?
No.
It's so good. It's like proper like porn for abandoned places.
Sounds sexy.
Got a lot of good buildings and a lot of vegetables.
Veritable vegetables.
Greenery is what I mean.
There's lots of green.
The trees. Oh my god, the trees. They're so
Love green. Gets me right hard, it does.
There, she was housed alone in a small cottage, although they did give her a fox terrier to keep her company, which I thought was quite nice. Like, here's a dog. Good luck.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
me
oh,
too.
you've sent me to solitary confinement. Well, I've got a dog. Okay, bye. Screw you, world. I'm fine here with my vegetables and dog.
And vegetables. I think it's funny because it's like nowadays when we're all in lockdown and quarantine, we can appreciate someone giving you a dog for it.
We can appreciate vegetables and dogs.
But at the time, in the 20th century,
hey, you got it right.
They were like, oh my god, this is so unethical. But
oh my god, they abandoned her with vegetables and dogs. Like, bitch, please. I live in a vegan household. Vegetables and dogs. That is my life. This is not quarantine. This is life.
Bitch, please. I live in a shoebox in London. I haven't been outside for more than once a month. I have a cat, which is a godsend because I love it so much. But also, it's not that bad, to be honest. So George visited Mary on the island, telling her that he was going to write a book and offering her part of the royalties. She rejected his offer and locked herself in the bathroom until he had left, which was a bad decision. So Mary, however, didn't believe that she was a carrier of the disease, since she had never exhibited any symptoms and because she had sent samples away to an independent laboratory which had come back negative for typhoid. Which, as a side note, she was required to leave like samples, I think 3 times a week, which is more social exposure than I get, but all right. And 40% of those test results 3 times a week were negative. So I'm guessing maybe it was partly negative because she was an asymptomatic host. No?
Well, yeah, her first quarantine was 2 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the source that I read, she had 163 samples taken and 120 came back positive.
Yeah.
All right, Typhoid Mary, 43 of your test samples came back negative, but 120 came back positive.
Yeah.
So maybe hush your typhoid gums and believe that you might have typhoid.
Yeah, but also, to be fair, she did send out samples via a friend to an independent laboratory, and they told her that she didn't have typhoid. So, in the 20th century, I'm guessing she was a skeptic, and I kind of can understand that. I'm not saying that it's right.
Her negative results could have also been because of the inaccuracy of the testing at the time.
Yeah. So after she had been on the island for circa 3 years, she was released on the condition that she would never work as a cook again. So what did Mary do? After some time working as a laundress, which paid less, she went right back into being a professional cook and super spreader. She dipped her fingers in that contaminated food. Oh, yeah.
No, she dipped her contaminated fingers in that food.
Definitely what I wanted to say.
I just find it so disturbing that typhoid is spread by fecal matter, and this is a professional cook.
Although I read that if it had been boiled, it would have been fine.
Yeah, the biggest contributor to her spread was her speciality, which was ice cream with peach slices in it.
Which the peaches weren't boiled, so
No,
that would
they
have
were
been the
just
spread.
cut slices of peach that she got her shitty fingers all over and then stuck them in your ice cream, and you were like, ooh, delicious peach ice cream with, oh, what's this brown little speck? Oh, that must be a lovely chocolate sprinkling. Oh, delicious.
Exactly.
Is
So,
how I imagined it went.
yeah. 5 years after her release from the quarantine island, she was found working in a kitchen of a hospital where, surprise, surprise, a typhoid outbreak had started. During these 5 years, she had worked as a cook for restaurants, hotels, and institutions using fake surnames. George, Soper, or Sober, we don't know. Or maybe we do. Or maybe I got it wrong. Had been hot on her trail, but Mary changed jobs frequently and he had been unable to catch up with her. Coincidentally, George's obsession with Mary is what led to her apprehension, as he had been called in to investigate the outbreak at the hospital and figured out that Mary worked there from seeing her handwriting and from hearing the other employees' description of her. Which is funny because I don't think any of my friends would recognize my handwriting.
It's because you've got a chicken scrawl.
But George fucking knew her handwriting. So she was apprehended again and sent back to North Brother Island to live in what was more or less isolation for another 23 years. And with more or less, I mean like she was allowed to go back into New York because North Brother Island, as I said, is in the East River and it's not that far away from the Bronx. So she was allowed in for day visits. It was just that she wasn't allowed to live there because she couldn't help being a cook, I guess.
Couldn't help not washing her hands.
I just mean that she wasn't really that isolated because, I mean, like day visits. How many days do I spend outside of my home in this lockdown? As we
But this
said,
lockdown is airborne, not fecally transmitted.
that's true. Even though there are many asymptomatic carriers of typhoid, she was the only one who had to be forcibly detained because she refused to stop working as a cook. She might have been the only woman in history who was repeatedly told to stay out of the kitchen.
At almost the same time, there was another person also in New York spreading typhoid.
Oh, Oh, Tony Labella?
I don't know. But they infected more people and had a higher death rate.
Mm-hmm.
But because Typhoid Mary was the first documented case of an asymptomatic carrier, she's the one that became famous.
Yeah. So when Mary died, some sources claim that they found that the Salmonella typhi bacteria was shed from her gallstones. She was offered an operation to remove her gallbladder during her first 3 years of quarantine on the quarantine island, or North Brother Island, but she refused this. Worth noting, though, is that an operation to remove the gallbladder was dangerous and often fatal in the beginning of the 20th century.
There are multiple researchers that dispute whether she was ever offered the gallbladder removal.
Oh, I only read that it was disputed that they did an autopsy.
That is also disputed, yeah.
Yeah.
There's dispute about whether she was ever offered the gallbladder removal.
Okay. So we don't know that, but also I think that it's true that in those times it was very dangerous.
Probably would have just cut her open with a swordfish and been like, there's some organs in there, let's just pull them out. All right, sew her back up. Where's my knitting needles?
Yeah. But does it merit any scientific background that the gallbladder could have?
It's a very, I'm going to say, interesting in the loosest sense of the term, topic. So one of the studies that I read said that the most common sites for typhoid infection are the lower intestine, the liver, spleen, bone marrow, and the gallbladder.
Mm-hmm.
In the same study, I think they looked at a cohort of patients who were classified as chronic sufferers of typhoid. Chronic would have been in the same category as Typhoid Mary in that they had a long-term typhoid infection that they weren't symptomatic for. And they found that 90% of their chronic typhoid cohort also had gallstones. They also found that of that 90%, 60% were antibiotic resistant, which is more of a modern thing.
Ooh.
An analysis of the typhoid on those patients showed that of 103 patients that had gallstones, 5 of them tested positive for typhoid, which is around about 5%, which in clinical terms is a really high percentage.
Oh.
Which lends to the theory that gallstones and the gallbladder can be responsible for harboring typhoid bacterium. Of those 5 patients that tested positive, 3 out of 4 of them had an 80 to 90% coverage of their gallstones with typhoid. So almost all of the gallstone that was present in their gallbladder was covered in typhoid, which again leads to gallstones equals reservoir for typhoid. Now, if we go back to the original question, which is, does removing the gallbladder remove the risk of typhoid? In modern day medicine, the first line of treatment for typhoid is antibiotics.
Yeah.
If the antibiotics fail to eradicate the infection in the gallbladder, it can be removed. But typhoid bacteria is not specific to the gallbladder. So if your antibiotic treatment has not cleared the infection in your hepatic system, which is the liver, the bile duct, and that region, then removing the gallbladder will have no effect because the bacteria are still present in your hepatic system. So if Mary was offered a gallbladder removal,
Yeah.
but her infection had spread to her liver or her hepatic system, then removing her gallbladder would have had no effect on whether she was a carrier or not. She would still harbour that infection.
Which might have been the case because theoretically,
She'd been a carrier for a long time.
yeah, theoretically, they thought that maybe she had gotten it as a fetus.
Yeah,
So,
they thought she got it from birth, even
Yeah.
though there's modern evidence to show that gallstones and the gallbladder can be a reservoir in the human body. She had probably progressed past the point where gallbladder removal would have been able to relieve her of her infectivity.
Yeah,
I don't
that
think
makes sense.
infectivity is a word, but I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
Her virility. Ooh, virile. That is all I have.
Okay. So even though there has been ethical issues raised about Mary's case, I don't really feel that bad for her, which is bad. I know it's bad. But seeing today's populations being resistant to wear masks in public spaces, etc., I kind of just feel like...
Wash your hands. In perspective, modern day society and all of these anti-maskers. I was sharing a bed with Ollie earlier, and he's particularly gaseous at the moment. What did I do? Put on a mask.
Did you?
Genuinely. Put on a face mask. I was like, this fucking stinks. I need some filter. I'm going to put on a face mask. If I can put on a face mask to avoid my dog's farts, surely all of these anti-maskers can just put on a face mask to avoid a deadly virus.
But they don't believe in it, just like Mary didn't believe in it. But she was in a time where that kind of made sense because she couldn't believe herself to be a carrier
Because she was asymptomatic.
Yeah, when that was a new idea. And even though he was the first author to describe a healthy carrier, as he put it, nowadays that is not a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why my opinions are biased, because nowadays I feel like everyone should know about it. But I also feel like that has skewed my perception of how Mary was treated as well. Because nowadays I'm like, find them, put them in quarantines. Who gives a fuck? Because they can't understand basic concepts of spreading. And at her day and age, I understand that it was difficult because she had never heard of that before and she had no education. But I also feel like in this day and age, my patience with people inches at most.
That's imperial. I don't know what that means.
2.5 centimeters at most. So Mary has been the inspiration for a comic book character and has also had a rap group named after her. And also she had that very famous song named after her. Typhoid Mary, girl, you gotta slow that spreading down. No, it was Mustang Sally.
To be honest with you, Bae, that was lost on me.
I realized, yeah.
Beautiful rendition, but wrong audience.
You want to know a sad thing? I listened to Mustang Sally to get it right.
That is quite sad. We've been planning that for 2 hours. 3 hours.
When I was pooping, I was like, Mustang Sally.
This will be hilarious. He'll totally get this.
I thought that was a general song that the general public would know about, but no.
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so that's the case. Mary Mallon, Typhoid Mary.
Merry fucking Christmas, y'all. We're done here.
Thank you so much for listening to Midweek Murders. We'll see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.